Do some tests.
Test. 2, 3. Test. Test.
All right, we're good.
All right. Dan, Basil, let's get started.
You got him?
Yeah, I do. Come up here too. Yeah.
And why do you put that mic on? Osborn after. Yeah, okay. Thanks, love. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Wanted to start by reading some testimonials that we got from members of the community. We did a lot of outreach in the weeks leading up to today since the announcement was made that the Tyson plant of its impending closure. And there are many people that work at the plant that have family members that work at the plant, and also the community at large that wanted to share some of their thoughts. And we picked 2 quotes that we wanted to share anonymously out of the respect of the individuals that reached out. The first one is an essay by a 17-year-old Lexington resident whose parents work at Tyson. She wrote this piece about their story. My parents are the definition of hard work. They gave Tyson their strength, their time, and pieces of their lives that they can never get back. They clocked in early, stayed late, took extra hours whenever the company needed. They worked in cold rooms, loud machines, long lines, and through pain they never complained because they believed their sacrifice meant a better future for their children. And now, after years of loyalty, Tyson is walking away from them and from all of us. The closing of the plant is not just a business decision. It is a wound to an entire community built by the hands of immigrant workers, by people like my parents who showed up every single day with courage and dignity. They didn't ask for much, only the chance to work, provide, and give us opportunities they never had. And yet the company they carried on their backs is turning its back on them. Where is the justice? And the next testimonial is, this is a letter from a young woman who's worked at Tyson for 8+ years. I'm one of the people who works hard every day to put food on your table. I'm also one of the many employees that Tyson is laying off. I've been working for this company for almost 7 years. I know people there who have worked here for more than 30 years, and all of us are getting the same thing, nothing. We have dangerous jobs. We work with sharp knives, yet none of us are getting any severance pay. Supervisors, though, they're getting 6 months pay. We are the ones who actually do the work. Some of us have injured hands that will never heal. All this plant has given us is trigger finger and pain. We want answers and we want equal treatment. During COVID-19, we risked our lives and the lives of our loved ones to keep this company. And this is how they treat us. I'm afraid of losing my home. I'm one of many single mothers who cry at night thinking about my children's future. Like so many fellow workers, my hands are in pain. But I would never complain because I need the job. I love my community. I am a human. All I want for Tyson is to do the right thing. All right. Next, we're going to hear from Dan Osborn, and we have one other speaker as well.
Hi, my name's Dan Osborn, candidate for U.S. Senate here in the state of Nebraska. I just wanted to be here today because I know what it feels like, what these folks are going to be going through, what they're going through right now. You know, when I heard the news of this plant closure, a lot of emotions were coming through me because, like I said, I've been in their shoes before. I know what it feels like to give company complete loyalty, what it's like to put in 16-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts, working holidays, working weekends. When the company needs you, you're there for them. And so what they're feeling right now is what I've felt before is betrayal. Betrayal, you know, for a life of dedication to a plant. But you know, it's not only those people inside there that have sacrificed too. It's certainly their families. But at the end of it, I stood up for my coworkers, and they replaced me in a heartbeat. So I completely understand their sacrifice and how they're feeling. But that's what these Tyson workers do. You know, we've heard from some of the employees. We continue to talk to people that are affected by this news. But there's been workers that have been here 10, 15, 20, 30 years that we've talked to. And they showed up early, they show up, or they stay late. They work through back pain, they work through knee pain, hip pain, hand pain, industrial accidents, you name it. I'm sure they've seen it, been through it. You know, and they take extra shifts when the company needs them to. They've worked through COVID. Why a lot of the country was staying home. They showed up to work to make sure we have food to put on our tables. They saved for down payments to put on their houses. They built their lives around this stable employment, and they did everything right. They showed up to work. That's one of the guarantees in this country. You work hard, you get ahead. And now, after giving their best years, they've been told their jobs are gone. The hourly workers who did the hard work are getting nothing, and only management gets a severance. But what's happening here in Lexington touches more than just the employees in this plant. It touches the businesses in town. It touches the skilled trades. Anybody who has anything to do with this plant, it certainly is going to affect their lives. You pull one thread, and the whole ecosystem can unravel. But think about what happens when 3,200 paychecks disappear from a town of 11,000. That's almost 30% of the population. Landlords lose tenants. Stores lose customers. Service businesses lose clients. Schools lose students. And churches lose parishioners. Youth sports teams fold. And Main Street businesses are going to have to board up their windows. These ripple effects don't show up in Tyson's quarterly earning report, but they're real, and they're devastating. Donnie King is the CEO of this company, and this week he will make $437,944. Just to let that sink in for a second. But this is market manipulation. I understand capitalism and its benefits, and what those benefits can bring communities. What I don't buy is that Tyson is simply just doing good business. This is nothing more than a move to funnel more profit into an already multi-billion-dollar industry. Look, the government was set up. I have a libertarian streak in me where I think smaller government is better government. But the government was also set up by the founders of this country to protect its citizens. And what Tyson is doing here is illegal. The Packers and Stockyard Acts say it's against the law to manipulate prices or restrain commerce. Tyson isn't selling this plant to a competitor. They're closing it, destroying 5% of America's beef processing capacity in turn. 4 companies control 85% of beef processing. 2 of them are Brazilian owned. When one of them closes a plant, they all benefit. Less competition means more power. That's exactly what the Packers and Stockyards Act was designed to stop. But I've got a question for all of you. Where are our elected officials? Where's Pete Ricketts? Where's Adrian Gonzalez? Where's Deb Fisher? When this closure was announced on a Friday before the Thanksgiving holiday, our Nebraska delegation remarkably had some canned responses of thoughts and prayers. The temperature's good today. It's not freezing out. But it was almost as if the federal delegation knew that this was coming. Pete Ricketts has the power to call up the USDA right now and put a stop to this. So why hasn't he? Maybe take a look at where his money comes from. The people of Lexington need their elected officials to fight now more than ever. And they don't have time for reports to come out and investigations to happen. The laws are in the books. The law that's been in the books for over 100 years should be enacted. It is really, really that simple. The law's clearly been broken. So pick up the damn phone, call Brooke Rollins, and get the USDA to enforce the law. But we're here to fight. The Tyson workers here in Lexington aren't asking for handouts. They're asking to keep what they've earned. They're asking for someone to enforce the law. They're asking for somebody to fight for them. I may not be a senator, and I'm not going to go anywhere until we get some answers. We're going to continue to highlight this issue. And to the workers of Lexington, you showed up when Tyson needed you. You worked through the pandemic. You sacrificed for your families. You helped build this community, and you deserve better than this. Thank you.
Just one more speaker, and then we can open it up for questions. Today we're joined by Basil Mushbarash. Basil is an antitrust attorney who has represented farmers in litigation against meat processors under the Packers and Stockyards Act, the same law that we're talking about today. He's also defended workers against illegal non-compete agreements and has advocated for farmers, small businesses, and consumers before the Federal Trade Commission, the Department of Justice, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. In 2024, Basil authored a landmark report, quote, Kings Over the Necessaries of Life, which exposed the monopolization and elimination of competition in America's agriculture system. This work has been featured in Reuters, Time Magazine, CNBC, Today Show, and numerous other places. Please welcome Basil Mushbarash.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. As our friend said, my name is Basil Mushbarash. I'm an antitrust lawyer, the Anti-Monopoly Council, a law firm that focuses on representing farmers, small businesses, and local governments in small towns and rural communities like this one. Most of the time, I'm either going through piles of research or driving between farms. So you'll kind of have to forgive me if I'm a little uncomfortable with microphones and cameras. It's kind of as I am. But before I start my comments, I wanted to read a testimonial from one of the workers at the Tyson plant that I think crystallizes what Tyson appears to be doing here better than any lawyer can. He says, we gave them our sweat and tears to get them through COVID because no one wanted to work. Now they want to give up on us. They won't sell the plant to anyone because they don't want competition. They will sit on the plant and let it rot. They just want to rob the ranchers of their own cattle, to line their pockets and raise beef prices for Americans. I came here from Texas to tell you basically one thing. Dan Osborn is right. The law is on this worker's side. The law is on Lexington's side. The Department of Agriculture and the Department of Justice can indeed file a lawsuit seeking to force Tyson either to keep this plant open or sell it to a competitor who will. And they should do so without delay. The reason they can take this action, and I want to explain a little bit about the law that applies here and why Tyson's conduct is probably illegal under it. The reason the government can take an action against Tyson is a law called the Packers and Stockyards Act of 1921. This act is one of our country's most important and stringent antitrust laws. It was enacted by Congress to protect ranchers and consumers and rural communities from abuses of power by dominant meat packers like Tyson. Toward that end, the act makes it illegal for any meat packer to engage in any course of business or do any act for the purpose or with the effect of manipulating prices or restraining commerce. Yet by choosing to dismantle its plant here in Lexington instead of selling it to a competitor, that's exactly what Tyson appears to be doing. The legal analysis here is pretty straightforward. The Lexington plant accounts for around 5% of the nation's cattle processing and beef production capacity. In the Nebraska region alone, it accounts for more than 50% of total capacity. By shutting down a plant that slaughters such a large portion of the cattle in this region and the country, Tyson will single-handedly reshape the nation's cattle markets from boom to bust. With this single decision, Tyson will cut down demand for the cattle raised by ranchers, and it will reduce the number of buyers competing for that cattle. As a result, ranchers will be forced to accept lower prices, and Tyson will be able to make higher profits. Indeed, since the shutdown will also eliminate a large amount of beef production, it will serve to keep beef prices at the record highs that we've seen recently, widening the spread between what ranchers get for their livestock and what consumers pay for meat at the grocery store. If this isn't a course of business that has the purpose or effect of manipulating or controlling prices, then, to be frank with you, I don't know what is. And the case against Tyson gets stronger when you look at the context of its actions. From reviewing the public record that has been reported on this shutdown, it's hard to see a legitimate business justification for it. The plant is operating, according to reporting, at 86% of its capacity. That's a downright enviable percentage compared to the average American plant, which is operating at 76% of capacity right now. The price of beef, like I said, is at record highs. If meatpacking were truly a free competitive industry without entrenched monopolists, that should incentivize Tyson to produce more beef, not less. At a minimum, it should make Tyson think long and hard before idling capacity, because it should fear ceding sales to competitors who might take advantage of the high beef prices to expand their own production. That's what we would expect in a free, competitive industry. But Tyson is doing the opposite. And the question is why? How can it do this? That question, I think, is what gets at the crux of the issue. The fundamental reason that Tyson can do this is the concentration of power in the meatpacking industry. Tyson, along with 3 other companies, control 85% of cattle slaughter and beef production in this country. Their interests are aligned. They don't need to outright conspire in order to follow each other's lead. When Tyson shuts down a plant, brings down the price of cattle, and raises the price of beef, they can just follow along with each other. And that chummy relationship makes it so that Tyson can do what it's doing. And because that's the root of the problem, I think the people here in Lexington and here in Nebraska deserve to know just how it is that we got to this point. Because it wasn't inevitable. It was a product of choices. Choices that led to this point where Tyson can shut down a plant to manipulate prices, ignore the threat of competition, and perhaps get away without any consequences. See, this isn't the first time we've been here. We've been in a situation like this. 100 years ago, as Dan described, we faced another concentrated meatpacking industry. We had a meat trust. It was composed of the big five meat packers at the turn of the 20th century. And at the time, their concentrated power was so alarming to people that they called them food dictators. Members of Congress said that the power that was concentrated in the big five meat packers of that time didn't just threaten financial ruin and disaster for ranchers and workers. It threatened the equal inalienable rights of both the producer and the consumer. That's a direct quote. And because of that, people came together from all walks of life: workers, ranchers, shopkeepers, muckrakers, like some of the folks here today, and lobbied Congress to pass laws that restrained the power of these corporations and restored the freedom of the market that they had taken away through their concentration of power. That was one of those laws, was the Packers and Stockyards Act. And at first, we didn't enforce those laws. It took a long fight, but eventually we did enforce them. And when we did in the 1940s, against the meat packers and against monopolies across the economy, that led to a revival of free enterprise and a revival of small towns and communities across this country that was unrivaled in history. Before that time, like I said, we had five meat packers. We had one company dominating things like farm machinery. We had one company that was sort of the Walmart of its day, the A&P, dominating grocery sales. But in the 1940s, we launched a campaign against monopolies. Hundreds, even thousands of cases were brought to enforce the antitrust laws, to impose rules that made it so that dominant players, like the big five meat packers, couldn't exclude small players from the market, couldn't exclude upstarts. And guess what happened? By the 1950s, just a decade later, those upstarts started showing up. The meatpacking industry changed. Suddenly, by the 1960s, we had dozens of meatpackers. The biggest players, the biggest four meatpackers, controlled just 22% of beef production, whereas they used to control 70% back in the meat trust days. And on top of all of that, the result of all of that was that these upstarts went into rural communities, opened new plants, industrialized rural communities, brought new jobs. And so much so that by the 1970s, we had an economy where small towns were growing again, where rural economies were growing for the first time in a century. We can do that again. We can do that again. And it starts with returning to a commitment to enforcing the antitrust laws, among them being the Packers and Stockyards Act. Restoring that economy, that free economy that prosperous economy where small towns can thrive as well as big cities. Restoring that starts right here in Lexington with enforcing this law against what Tyson is doing. What Tyson is doing amounts to robbing ranchers and workers and consumers to enrich itself. We don't have to stand by and allow it to do that. We can have political leaders who enforce the law and secure justice. Thank you.
Okay, we'll now take some questions.
Okay, we're gonna open it up to questions. If anybody has any, be happy to answer anything. That was super easy.
I guess I have.
Yeah.
So you touched on it a little bit, but could you just maybe go into a little more detail on why some of your background, work, and lifestyle would benefit working class Nebraskans and people facing these situations in Lexington?
Yeah, so the question is how my background can help, especially if elected into the US Senate, can help workers in Nebraska. I want to start by answering that with less than 2% of our elected officials in both the House and Senate come from the working class. I think if you don't know what it's like to put Christmas on a credit card and you don't know what it's like to struggle through 7 days a week, you probably should be making legislation for the rest of us. And I'm not saying that our entire Congress needs to come from the working class. Of course not. We need lawyers like Basil, and no offense against the lawyers, but we need everybody. I think our government should look like ourselves. Right now, it simply does not. So, where I come from, I've punched a clock my whole life, and I've wrenched on machines, and I know what that's like. So when I approach policy, I'm certainly going to approach it from a place of knowing those things and having felt those things and understand those things on a very deep level. So that's the advantage that people of Nebraska will get if they cast a vote for me. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody taking the time to be here, and this is just the beginning of it for us. We're going to continue to work hard and hopefully force our federal delegation to get off their hands and join this fight, because this isn't about politics right now. This is about the workers. This is about people that need help, and they need help right now, not tomorrow. They need it now. Thank you.